Las Vegas, 1970. Diane sat alone at Elvis's show, tears streaming down her face. Elvis stopped mid-song and asked, "Why are you crying?" Her answer, "It's my 40th birthday and I'm completely alone," led to the most unforgettable birthday celebration 1,500 strangers ever witnessed. The woman nobody remembered. Diane Foster turned 40 years old on November 14th, 1970. She woke up that morning in a hotel room in Las Vegas, completely alone, and realized that nobody in the world had remembered her birthday. Not her ex-husband, who'd left her 2 years ago for a younger woman. Not her adult children, who lived in different states and were too busy with their own lives to call. Not her friends back home in Minnesota, who'd slowly drifted away after her divorce. Nobody. Diane sat on the edge of the hotel bed and cried. 40 years old, divorced, alone, forgotten. She'd come to Las Vegas on impulse. After her divorce, Diane had thrown herself into work as a secretary, saving every dollar. When she realized her 40th birthday was approaching and nobody seemed to care, she'd made a spontaneous decision. She'd take herself to Vegas for the weekend. At least she could spend her birthday somewhere exciting instead of sitting alone in her empty apartment. She'd bought a ticket to Elvis's show at the International Hotel, not because she was a huge Elvis fan, though she liked his music well enough, but because going to a show seemed like something you should do in Vegas, something to distract from the loneliness. That evening, Diane put on her nicest dress, a blue cocktail dress she'd bought years ago and rarely had occasion to wear. She did her makeup carefully, trying to hide the evidence that she'd been crying most of the day. She looked in the mirror and thought, "I'm 40 years old, alone, and nobody cares." She almost didn't go to the show, almost stayed in the hotel room, ordered room service, and cried herself to sleep. But she'd paid for the ticket. Might as well use it. The show that changed everything. The International Hotel showroom was packed with 100 people when Diane took her seat. She'd bought a single ticket in the middle section, not great seats, but decent enough to see the stage. Everyone around her seemed to be with someone, couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing together, families celebrating something. Diane was the only person sitting alone. When Elvis walked on stage, the crowd erupted. Screaming, applause, pure excitement. Diane tried to join in, tried to feel the energy, but she just felt more alone. All these happy people surrounding her, and she was an island of sadness in a sea of joy. Elvis performed his usual high-energy opening. "That's all right. I got a woman. Love me." The crowd loved it. Diane sat quietly, tears beginning to stream down her face despite her best efforts to hold them back. She wasn't crying because of the music. She was crying because she was 40 years old, watching a concert alone on her birthday. And the contrast between Elvis's celebration on stage and her loneliness in the audience was overwhelming. Elvis asks one question that changes everything. About 30 minutes into the show, Elvis was singing "Suspicious Minds." As he moved across the stage, his eyes scanned the audience, making eye contact with fans, feeding off their energy. Then he saw her. A woman in a blue dress sitting alone, crying. Not screaming fan crying, real crying, sad crying. Elvis stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, gradually stopped playing. The audience quieted, wondering what was happening. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at Diane. "Ma'am, you in the blue dress, are you okay?" Diane froze. Elvis Presley was talking to her. 1,500 people turned to look at her. She wanted to disappear. I'm fine," Diane said weakly. "You don't look fine. You're crying. What's wrong?" Diane shook her head, too embarrassed to speak. Elvis knelt down at the edge of the stage, getting closer to her level. "Honey, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I just want to make sure you're okay. Did something happen? Is someone bothering you?" "No, nobody's bothering me," Diane said, her voice breaking. "Nobody's doing anything. That's the problem." "What do you mean?" Diane took a shaky breath. She could lie, make up something innocuous, but what was the point? Her life was already rock bottom. What did she have to lose by telling the truth? "Today is my 40th birthday," Diane said, loud enough for Elvis and the nearby sections to hear. "And I'm completely alone. Nobody remembered. Nobody called. Nobody cares. I'm sitting here by myself watching your show because I didn't want to spend my birthday crying in a hotel room. But I'm crying anyway." The showroom went completely silent. Elvis's face showed genuine pain. Today is your birthday? Your 40th birthday, and you're here alone? Diane nodded, tears flowing freely now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your show. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The birthday party that erupted. Elvis stood up and addressed the entire audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to tell you something. This beautiful lady in the blue dress, what's your name, honey? Diane Foster. Diane Foster just told me it's her 40th birthday today, and she's here alone because nobody in her life remembered. Nobody called her, nobody celebrated with her. She came to Vegas by herself because she didn't want to be alone on her birthday, but she's alone anyway. What Elvis does next makes the entire audience stand up. Elvis paused, letting that sink in. Then he said, Well, Diane, you're not alone anymore, because you've got 500 new friends here tonight, and we're going to give you a birthday party you'll never forget. Elvis turned to the band. Guys, you know what to play. The band started the opening chords of Happy Birthday, and Elvis, using his famous voice, began to sing, Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Diane, happy birthday to you. But he didn't sing it alone. Within seconds, the entire audience joined in, 1,500 voices singing happy birthday to a woman most of them had never met, singing because Elvis had asked them to, singing because they understood what it felt like to be alone, singing because sometimes strangers are the only family you have. Diane buried her face in her hands and sobbed, not sad crying anymore, overwhelmed crying, grateful crying, the kind of crying that happens when you realize you're not as alone as you thought. When the song ended, the audience erupted in applause. Not for Elvis, for Diane, cheering for her, celebrating her, making her birthday special even though they didn't know her. Diane, would you come up here? Elvis asked. I've got something for you. Security helped Diane make her way to the stage. She was shaking, overwhelmed, barely able to process what was happening. Elvis took her hand and helped her up the stairs. How do you feel? Elvis asked her gently. I can't believe this is happening, Diane said, her voice trembling. I woke up this morning thinking nobody cared if I existed, and now you've got 1,500 people who care, and I care. Nobody should spend their birthday alone. Nobody should feel forgotten. You matter, Diane. Your life matters. Your birthday matters. The gifts from strangers. Elvis turned to the audience. Folks, Diane came here alone, no presents, no cake, no celebration. That's not right. Who wants to give Diane a birthday present? For a moment, nothing happened. Then a woman in the front row stood up and shouted, I've got something. She pulled off her bracelet, a simple silver bracelet, and brought it to the stage. Happy birthday, Diane. May your 40th year be better than your 39th. Then another person stood up. A man took off his watch and brought it forward. You're going to need to know what time it is in your fabulous 40s. Happy birthday. Then more people stood. Someone gave Diane a scarf. Someone else gave her earrings. A couple gave her $40 cash. $1 for every year, and a promise that next year will be better. Within 10 minutes, Diane had received over 30 gifts from complete strangers. The stage was covered with items people had given her. Jewelry, cash, flowers from a centerpiece, even a small stuffed animal someone had won at a casino. Diane was crying so hard she could barely stand. Elvis kept his arm around her shoulders, holding her steady. The gift Elvis gives her isn't what anyone expected. Diane, I've got a gift. For you too, Elvis said. But it's not a thing, it's a promise. Elvis looked directly at Diane, his face serious. I promise you that you're not going to spend another birthday alone. Not next year, not the year after, not ever again. Because after tonight, you've got family. These people here, they're your family now, and I'm your family. We're going to stay in touch. You're going to write to me and tell me how your 41st birthday goes, and I'm going to make sure you know you matter. Then Elvis did something unexpected. He took off one of his rings, a gold ring with a large stone, and handed it to Diane. This ring has been on my finger for 3 years. I wear it every show, but I want you to have it. When you look at it, remember tonight. Remember that you're not alone. Remember that 1,500 strangers loved you enough to celebrate you. Diane stared at the ring in disbelief. I can't take this. It's too valuable. It's not about value, Elvis said. It's about meaning. This ring means you matter. That's worth more than gold. Elvis slipped the ring onto Diane's finger. It was too big, but she closed her fist around it like she was holding something sacred. The audience gave Diane another standing ovation. Not because Elvis told them to, because they were moved by what they were witnessing, a broken woman being reminded of her worth, a lonely soul being surrounded by love, a forgotten birthday becoming unforgettable. The rest of the show. Elvis kept Diane on stage for the rest of the concert. He brought out a chair and had her sit beside the piano while he performed. Every few songs, he'd check on her. "You doing okay, birthday girl?" Diane would nod, still crying, still overwhelmed, still clutching the ring and the pile of gifts in her lap. At one point, Elvis dedicated "Can't Help Falling in Love" to her. This one's for Diane, who reminded me that sometimes the most important thing we can do is make someone feel less alone. When Elvis sang "You Are So Beautiful," he turned to Diane and said, "This song is about you. You are beautiful. You are worthy. You are loved. Don't ever forget that." By the end of the show, Diane wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling, genuinely smiling. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like she mattered. When the show ended, Elvis hugged Diane before she left the stage. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Remember what I said. You're not alone. You write to me, okay? Let me know how you're doing." "I will," Diane promised. "Thank you, Elvis. You saved me tonight. I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline." "You saved yourself by being honest," Elvis said. "You told the truth about your pain. That takes courage. Never stop being that honest. Never stop asking for help when you need it." After the show, Diane went back to her hotel room that night with a bag full of gifts from strangers, a ring from Elvis Presley, and a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. She laid all the gifts out on the bed and looked at them. Each one represented a stranger who'd cared enough to give her something. Each one was proof that she wasn't invisible. She wasn't forgotten. She mattered. Over the next few days, Diane received messages from people who'd been at the show. The hotel staff helped forward them to her room, notes saying, "Happy birthday. You're not alone. You inspired me." One note said, "I'm also divorced and alone. Watching Elvis celebrate you gave me hope that maybe I'm not as invisible as I feel. Thank you for having the courage to be honest about your pain." Diane realized something profound. By being vulnerable, by admitting her loneliness, she'd given other people permission to acknowledge their own loneliness. She'd created connection through honesty. The letters to Elvis. True to her promise, Diane wrote to Elvis. She sent a letter to Graceland a week after returning home to Minnesota. "Dear Elvis, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. Thank you for saving my life. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it literally. Before I came to Vegas, I'd been thinking about ending my life. I felt so alone, so forgotten, so worthless. I thought nobody would notice if I disappeared. Then you saw me crying. You stopped your show. You asked what was wrong. And when I told you the truth, you didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me with understanding. You made 1,500 strangers sing to me. You gave me your ring. You promised I'd never be alone again. I've worn your ring every day since that night. When I start to feel forgotten, I look at it and remember, 1,500 people celebrated me. Elvis Presley told me I matter. I'm not alone. I'm still figuring out my life. I'm still dealing with divorce and loneliness and all the hard things. But I have hope now. I have proof that I matter. Thank you for giving me that. Your friend, Diane Foster." Elvis read the letter and immediately wrote back. His response was simple. "Diane, you're not alone. You never were. You just needed to be reminded. Keep wearing that ring. Keep remembering. And keep writing to me. I meant what I said. We're family now. Your friend, Elvis." That began a correspondence that would last for years. Diane would write to Elvis about her life, the good days and the bad days. Elvis wouldn't always respond, but he did respond. Short notes, words of encouragement, reminders that she mattered. What Diane did on her 50th birthday brought Elvis to tears. In 1980, Diane turned 50. A decade had passed since that birthday in Las Vegas. In those 10 years, Diane's life had transformed completely. She'd gone back to school and become a therapist, specializing in helping people through divorce and loneliness. She'd rebuilt her relationship with her children. She'd made new friends. She'd learned to love herself again. And on her 50th birthday, Diane did something extraordinary. She rented a community center in her town and threw a birthday party, not for herself, but for people who had nobody to celebrate with. She put ads in the local paper. Are you spending your birthday alone? Come celebrate with us. Free food, free cake, free company. Nobody should celebrate alone. 37 people showed up. Some were elderly, some were divorced, some were just lonely. All of them were grateful. Diane told them the story of her 40th birthday, how she'd been alone and broken, how Elvis had seen her crying and turned her loneliest moment into her most memorable celebration, how strangers had become family through simple acts of kindness. Elvis taught me that nobody should feel alone on their birthday, Diane said. So I'm passing that gift forward. Welcome to your birthday party. You're not alone anymore. Diane sent Elvis a letter describing the party, including photos of all 37 people celebrating together. She wrote, "You taught me how to turn loneliness into connection. I'm trying to do the same for others. Thank you for showing me the way." Elvis received the letter at Graceland. He was in declining health by then, struggling with the prescription drug addiction and isolation that would take his life a year later. But when he read Diane's letter and saw the photos, he cried. "This is what it's all about," Elvis told a friend who was with him. "Not the music, not the fame. This, helping people feel less alone. Diane got it. She understood what I was trying to teach." Elvis wrote back one final time, "Diane, what you did for those 37 people is what I tried to do for you. The greatest gift we can give is to make someone feel seen, feel valued, feel less alone. You're doing that now. I'm so proud of you. Your friend always, Elvis." Elvis died less than a year later, on August 16, 1977. When Diane heard the news, she cried for days. Not just because Elvis had died, but because the man who'd saved her life would never know how many other lives she'd saved because of him. The birthday party that became a tradition. Diane continued throwing birthday parties for lonely people every year on her own birthday. What started with 37 people grew to over 100. People who had nobody would show up, and Diane would make them feel celebrated. She told the story of Elvis and her 40th birthday at every party. Not to brag about meeting a celebrity, but to illustrate a point. One act of kindness can change a life. One moment of seeing someone can heal a lifetime of invisibility. Many people who attended Diane's parties said it changed their lives. One man said, "I was planning to kill myself on my birthday. I felt so alone. Then I saw Diane's ad in the paper and came to her party. She made me feel like I mattered. That party saved my life." Another woman said, "I'd been divorced for 5 years and hadn't celebrated a birthday since. I thought I didn't deserve celebration. Diane showed me that everyone deserves to feel special, regardless of their circumstances." In 1995, Diane was featured in a local newspaper article about her birthday parties. The article went viral, as much as things could go viral before the internet. Other communities started replicating the idea, birthday parties for lonely people, inspired by Diane's story and Elvis's compassion. By the time Diane died in 2018 at age 88, her birthday party tradition had spread to over 50 cities. Thousands of people who would have spent their birthdays alone had instead spent them surrounded by strangers who became friends. At Diane's funeral, over 300 people attended. Many of them had met her at birthday parties. They came to celebrate a woman who taught them that loneliness doesn't have to be permanent, that connection is possible, that kindness matters. On her casket, Diane's children placed the ring Elvis had given her in 1970, the ring she'd worn every day for 48 years, the ring that reminded her she wasn't alone. The ring that symbolized the night her life changed. What Elvis's band remembered members of Elvis's band who were on stage that night in 1970 often talked about it in interviews. James Burton, Elvis's guitarist, said, "Elvis had a gift for seeing people, really seeing them. Not just fans or audience members, but humans with pain and joy and stories. That night with Diane, he saw her crying and he couldn't continue the show until he knew she was okay. That's who Elvis was. He cared more about one woman's broken heart than about 1,500 people's entertainment. Ronnie Tutt, the drummer, said, "When Elvis started singing Happy Birthday and the whole audience joined in, I got chills. I've played thousands of shows, but that moment was special. You could feel the room transform from entertainment to sacred space. We weren't performing anymore. We were participating in healing." Glenn D. Hardin, the piano player, said, "Elvis gave Diane one of his rings. Those rings were expensive, and Elvis loved his jewelry, but he didn't hesitate. He saw someone in pain and he wanted to help. That's generosity. That's love. That's Elvis." Have you ever felt completely alone on a day that should have been celebratory? A birthday, holiday, or special occasion where nobody remembered or cared? How did you get through it? Share in the comments. You're not as alone as you think. What this story teaches us. November 14th, 1970. A woman sat alone at an Elvis concert, crying on her 40th birthday because nobody remembered. Elvis stopped his show, asked what was wrong, and turned her loneliest moment into her most memorable celebration. That's the power of seeing someone, really seeing them, not just looking at them, but noticing their pain, acknowledging their humanity, and responding with compassion. Diane wasn't crying because the concert was sad. She was crying because her life was sad, and Elvis saw that. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't tell her to stop ruining the show. He stopped the show for her. How many Dianes are sitting around us right now? People drowning in loneliness, convinced nobody cares, invisible in plain sight? How many people are crying silent tears while the world celebrates around them? We have the power to be someone's Elvis, to notice the person crying in the crowd, to stop what we're doing and ask if they're okay, to turn loneliness into connection through simple acts of kindness. Elvis didn't do anything complicated that night. He sang Happy Birthday. He asked the audience to join in. He gave Diane a ring and a promise. Simple actions, but they saved a life. And that saved life went on to save other lives. Diane spent 48 years throwing birthday parties for lonely people because Elvis taught her that nobody should feel alone. One act of kindness created a ripple effect that's still spreading today. That's the lesson. That's the power we all have. We can't solve everyone's problems. We can't fix every broken heart. But we can see people. We can acknowledge their pain. We can offer connection when they're drowning in isolation. Sometimes that's all it takes. A song, a gift, a promise. Simple acts of noticing and caring. Simple acts that say, you matter. You're not invisible. You're not alone. Diane thought nobody remembered her birthday. Elvis proved that sometimes strangers remember us better than the people who are supposed to love us. Sometimes family isn't blood. It's the person who sees you crying and stops to ask why. After hearing this story, who will you notice today? Who around you might be silently suffering, feeling invisible, convinced nobody cares? Will you be their Elvis? Will you stop and see them? Share in the comments what you're going to do differently. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove the simplest acts of kindness can save lives. Share this story with someone who works with lonely people. Therapists, social workers, community organizers. They need to know their work matters. And if you're reading this and you feel alone, if nobody remembered your birthday, if you feel invisible, hear this. You matter. Your life has value. You're not alone. Somewhere, someone cares. And if you can't find that person today, be that person for someone else tomorrow. Because that's what Diane did. She took her pain and transformed it into purpose. She took her loneliest moment and used it to make sure others didn't have to feel that same loneliness. That's how we heal. Not by pretending our pain doesn't exist, but by using it to help others. Not by suffering alone, but by admitting our loneliness and allowing others to connect with us through it. Elvis saw Diane crying and he stopped everything. Will you do the same when you see someone drowning? Will you be the person who turns loneliness into connection? Because that's what the world needs. Not more entertainment, more connection. Not more performance, more presence. Not more celebrities, more compassion. Be someone's Elvis. Notice the person crying in the crowd. Stop what you're doing. Ask what's wrong. Make them feel seen. That simple act might save a life, and that saved life might go on to save others. One moment, one act of noticing, one decision to care. That's all it takes to change everything.